everybody, it's Christina Marie Weber, and I run a company called Christian Biz Owners on Fire, and we help faith-based and spiritual business owners who want a more fulfilling and prosperous business or ministry while putting God, their purpose, and their relationships first on a daily basis. So this is our monthly process. What I do is I take a question that someone submits me, a client, a prospect, somebody following me, or something I just observe. It's kind of common along entrepreneurs, and I do a little education video on that. So today we're going to be talking about being embarrassed about that your business is a mess. So to give you a little background on this, one of my offerings is I have a group coaching program, and it's I really help people have transformations, not just fix a problem, band-aid approach. And so everyone in the group has a 12-month commitment. So and it's an open-ended group, so there are people coming in at different times. Everyone still does it for 12 months. But so I had recently one of the clients in my group was her first or second time there, and then one of my other clients in the group, she's toward the end of her commitment. So this came up with this new client, and in the hot seat coaching part, she made a comment. She said, everything's a mess. My business is a mess, my life's a mess. And so what I wanted to talk about, it was interesting because the member that had been there before, we really normalized it. Everybody feels like that. In fact, you generally don't pull out your credit card if you feel like things are running great. And the member that was at the end of her commitment realizes very distinctly that that's how she felt as well, and that we did get that under control, and she was able to achieve her vision. So it's a very normal process. But I think it is a very common process, common experience when, we see behind the curtain in our business, and a lot of times we're not proud of it. It's not looking really great. So I want to talk about that. So there are really 4 steps I'm going to talk about what to do if you feel like you're embarrassed that your business is a mess. So the first one is be in an environment where you feel safe. And I definitely try to create that in my coaching program. But so there are different kinds of support people, different kinds of business environments. And not all of them make you feel safe. I had a client who just dreaded meeting with her accountant. She wasn't doing well in her business, was struggling, kind of finding her way, but it was a very uncomfortable, negative, like he'd make comments, that were kind of, she felt put down or stupid or whatever. I don't care what's going on in your business. Having a professional that you're paying to support you, that where you get around them and you feel low and unmotivated and humiliated, that's just not going to work. That's just not going to help you. So, but there are certain business environments and certain business people, support people, that kind of carry that kind of attitude, and it's just not helpful if you're feeling embarrassed about your business to be in those kind of environments. The truth is, if someone is in business and says they have no challenges, they're that's just not true. I mean, everybody has challenges, no matter what level you're at. So a lot of times there are certain support groups where it's all about looking good and, perception. And again, I just don't find those kind of groups really helpful to really dig in and transform your business. Maybe a networking thing you go to periodically. But if you're going to have a really business support group system, again, I think you really want to look for those kind of things. Shaming environments are not conducive to identifying the roots to why you're feeling embarrassed about your business and how to begin to address them. You can't even go there. You're going to be stuck. So this, it's really helped me in general with this whole thing of getting the right environment. I was a private practice licensed clinical marriage and family therapist for about 2 decades. And one of the real advantages of having done that is I saw all different walks of life, people in my office. So people you would never think had different kinds of struggles or insecurities or whatever. I saw behind the curtain all the time. And I realized that things are not what they appear. And as part of doing that practice, one of the things I was able to learn to do, and I didn't try to do this, but even outside of my therapy practice, when I was around different people, there were certain things I could see through more of a phony presentation versus what's really going on. You just learn body language, the way people carry themselves, what they say, just gut feel. Those are just skills that you develop when you're in this field. And so I'm able to spot it, but other people aren't. If you haven't had that kind of experience or those kind of skills, it's really easy to kind of think that just because person X is confident and walking around and looks like they're doing great, that they really are, and it seems like everybody else is, and it's really easy to kind of think like there's something wrong with you. So I have really learned, I just don't feel intimidated by anybody's facade. I don't use the information that I feel like I'm getting just from my observation skills against people. Now, there are people that do that. There are people that are very skilled in the business world, that are very, very skilled at kind of reading people. And the bad thing is they actually do take advantage and they use that information to their benefit and maybe to the not the benefit of the person. So I intentionally don't do that. And what I try to do is in my groups that I facilitate is I really try to create this environment where people can be real. If you can't be real, you're really not going to get to the bones of what you need to do. So the first thing is being in an environment where you can be real. Secondly, is you need to step two is get out of denial. If you're so defensive or feel so attacked or just inferior because everybody's putting on a facade, you can't really even get in touch with what's going on. You can't get out of denial. So it's a prerequisite. You have to have a safe environment. And then getting out of denial, I'm a big fan, I'm a big believer, is the same virtues that help you grow in holiness also help you grow in your business. And I'm a big advocate of humility. So if you really think of what humility is, and it really does help you get out of denial, it's seeing yourself as you really are, no worse, no better. And actually, that's a lot easier said than done. So there's a couple of things that can get in the way of you being able to actually see yourself realistically, so that you can start to correct the problems and get out of denial. So one of the challenges in less than functional families, we can get a distorted view of ourselves. So for example, if you were in a family where your kids in the family were very indulged and spoiled, a lot of times they think they're better than they really are as far as their skill level or how their overall quality of a person. In fact, my dad's a psychologist, and one of the things he would say is the worst thing parents can do to their kids is spoil them. And you really see it because it completely unprepares them for the world. Because the world doesn't operate based on this inflated idea of who this person is that whoever spoiled them created. The world is more harsh and objective and saying, you either cut it or you're not. And so a lot of times these people really are overestimating where they are, and you're just not going to get anywhere if can't be real about where you really are. You think you're better skill level than you are. Other things that can happen in more pathological families, they may be threatened by your strengths, which sounds really weird, but we have more and more pathological family systems as we grow in abundance. More of these kinds of traits that foster that kind of family it's just the way the human nature is, and we're in a period of abundance and prosperity. So there are more families like this across all social and economic backgrounds. So in these kind of families, they may actually feel threatened by your strengths or gifts. So what can happen there is they either don't foster any kind of you identifying those strengths and really developing them, which is what a really great, actually good enough parent would do, or they may twist that and feel threatened by it and label things that are actually strengths as negatives, as liabilities. So you can really get twisted. So if you came in one of these kinds of family systems, it's kind of hard to really be able to be clear about where you are and get out of denial because you got all this other baggage and stuff. So, the other aspect, and I've kind of touched on it before, is as far as getting out and out. In business, it's customary to put our best foot forward. People don't broadcast their weaknesses or the weaknesses of their business. This gives everyone a distorted perception of how every business is actually doing. Interview many business coaches and you'll find out otherwise. So I have a lot of them on my guests. So these are people that are going into, you know, by the outside looks like a very successful business, but they may have some internal problems. I mean, they're making it maybe, but just barely. And so we don't know that, about a business. In fact, there's a business mentor during COVID. He's done all the research on the stats. He said most businesses have enough cash flow to get them through to pay payroll for 2 weeks. That's it. A lot of people, are businesses that have saved up, but the majority are kind of in that kind of a tight situation. So when you stop the spread and let's shut the businesses down, he told all of his clients, no, do not stop your business, because you will go out of business if you do that, because you just don't have the runway, the cash flow. So again, nobody's advertising that they have 2 weeks or less of funds in their business. So, just understand there's a lot more out there than you can see. And your job is to really get some input on where you are, because that's going to help you start digging out of whatever the root cause is of what's making you feel embarrassed about your business. So step 3 is get an accurate frame of reference. So businesses go through developmental stages, just like a human being goes through developmental stages. So just because somebody has a big list, big email list, a big following, a fancy website, active social media, does not mean they're making money. Again, people, a lot of times in the profit first model, which I'm a big advocate of, they kind of really emphasize keeping the costs low. So just because someone spends a lot of money on those things doesn't mean maybe they have other funds or whatever they do, that doesn't mean they're actually have a successful business. So you could have someone with a less zippy website that's actually being more prudent with their funds and being more profitable than somebody else. So don't let all of those kind of glitzy things. Yeah, it's nice. We want to get to the point where we have a consistent brand and everything looks great. I mean, you do want to get there, but don't let that, if someone doesn't have that, necessarily mean they're not there or they are. Now it can be. I mean, I had somebody say one of the things he can see is when a business never updates their stuff, that kind of is an indicator that maybe they're struggling. And I think there's some truth to that. Or they haven't had, they're just barely making it. They don't have enough to kind of re-put into the business. So again, getting the perspective, the length of time in a business doesn't mean you're at a certain place developmentally in your business. And that can play a number on your head. You can be thinking, God, I've been in business this amount. Why am I still struggling with this? Or why can't... You could have been surviving in your business many years and never really learned some business things you needed to learn. And you held on, but so you may not be as far along as the length of time your business has been around. And yeah, that could if you look at it that way, it could make you feel bad. But let's just be real about it. Many people don't have those kind of business skills, and the fact that you've survived in your business is nothing to be ashamed of. But a lot of times we can play that in our head. I've been in business X amount of time, and blah blah blah. I should be here, should be there. There are a number of factors that impact where you are in your business or how much you're making it professionally. And I think the most helpful thing I've heard recently is by Dr. Jennifer Morse. She's an economist, and she did a study on when you really take every other factor out, and this thing of men earn more than women, okay? What they found is that men do earn more than women, but the major reason why they earn more than women is because of child rearing. Is when you, as a woman, have kids and maybe you take time out of the workforce, or maybe you're working less hours, or you're not working as intensely as someone that has a spouse at home handling all of that or doesn't have kids, over time that affects your income and your growth in your business and your trajectory. It is what it is. It's not anything to be feel bad about, but if you're not really even giving yourself any grace for that, and you can plug in caring for family members or you have different things, but there are other factors that can, and a lot of this goes in women because we're so wired to relationships, which is a good thing. Um, but let's say we've mentioned child rearing, caring for an elderly family. If you went through a period of an illness of any kind where you had to kind of back it down, or a family member that had an illness, that can affect where you are based. You've been in business X amount of time, but you're a little set back. Well, having a special needs child, what's your role in the family? Maybe you are the one that has a pretty primary role in your bigger family. You're always having the family events at your house or this thing. Again, that factors in. It's not anything wrong or right, but you need to be fair with yourself. Talking about people that have spouses in the military and they're having to move all the time, they're limited in what kind of things they can do, and they're always moving after 2 years or resetting a home or all, even the time and distraction of moving. So if you're not really counting all of that extra stresses or extra time diversions or focus diversions, and you're just embarrassed about your business because you're comparing it to someone that maybe wasn't moving every 2 years or didn't have to pull up, or couldn't really get certain jobs because they didn't want someone that's going to be relocated, and they know that you're in the military and that's going to happen. Maybe you prioritize, maybe you've always been the kind of person. I always look at the 6 life areas: health, wealth, personal fulfillment, career, spirituality, and relationships. Maybe you're a kind of person that's always really been a little bit more balanced than someone that maybe has a business that's shooting through the stars, and you've done that by choice. Like you wanted to regularly exercise, do triathlons, or you didn't want to be as intense constantly on your business or your professional life. You want to make a living, but it wasn't as important as some of these other things were. That could be a play factor. I've known women, speaking of women, where if you have a high maintenance spouse, maybe a man could say that about the woman too, but maybe you have a spouse that has a pretty hefty career and you have to kind of follow that person's career. You're going to dinners with their, because business dinners with them, with their career. Now that's going to affect you and growing your business. So you've got to factor all of this stuff in when you're having the assessment of yourself. And a lot of times people aren't doing that. They're just comparing their insides with somebody's outsides. They're not factoring any of that stuff in, and then they come up short. They feel embarrassed about their business. So step 4 is get objective outside input consistent with your value system on how to get out of the embarrassment situation. So there's a couple things here. One is you personally, like I mentioned, with maybe how you were raised, your value system, or your cultural context, you may have some blind spots that these things didn't even occur to you, or you didn't even consider. Maybe you had a parent die or a sibling die and that set you back, or just different things. So we all have blind spots, and so you're only going to get so far maybe being more objective about where you are in your business alone. Now it's really difficult to pull yourself out of something. I mean, if you could have, you would have, probably. So, that's something to be aware of. But if you have the wrong kind of support people, they can actually make it worse. They don't have a similar value system. If they don't, if they, kind of come from more of a, like some of the things you prioritize, they wouldn't, or they don't understand the time it takes to raise children or things like that. Trying to get any kind of validation or perspective, objective perspective from somebody else with a very twisted or distorted view anyway, that is not similar to the way you value things, that actually can make it worse. So what what you really want to watch is sometimes the embarrassment can turn into what I call shame. Should have already mastered everything. Now, this is where you stop thinking my business isn't working or something wrong. There's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me of why my business, why I'm embarrassed about my business or why. And that's a real problem area because we want to, and that's what all these previous steps are trying to get away from. We're trying to really look more objectively at your circumstances, what's going on. Yeah, I'm sure you made some choices. Everyone makes choices, even people with businesses they're not embarrassed about make choices that impact them or that they wish they would have made. But you're really going to have a hard time really being constructive about assessing and then finding the root problem and getting some help with that. If you start to be labeling there's something wrong with me, that just shuts people down, and I've seen it happen quite a bit. So, really, to get out of this, it's very important if you chronically feel ashamed of your business or embarrassed of your business. It is important to get some kind of perspective and help, whatever that looks like, because a lot of times it will just be a spiral down. And I am convinced, I had one of my guests on the radio show who said that he thinks mindset's 97% of what success is, and I say there's a lot of truth to that. It's not just the mindset, but the mindset gets us to take the right action. So if you've got this playing around, I'm embarrassed about my business, guess what? Your mindset isn't where it needs to be. You don't even know, you're not even addressing the root of where the problem is, and you're probably not taking action and probably not super motivated to take action because you're kind of in a down place. So it really is important. It is a very important thing. Don't let yourself spiral down without getting any help. It's really important if you want to be successful long term. Everybody has times where they don't feel great about things in their business or otherwise. The key is to learn from it, understand objectively what is and isn't going on, and take small incremental actions to move out of that. This is what I help people do all the time. And so if this is resonating with you and you'd like to look at maybe considering me for some professional support, I'd love to have a conversation with you. The best way to do that is you can reach out to me. You can give me a direct message on LinkedIn, Christina Marie Weber, or search for Christian Biz Owners on Fire. Send me a message there. Or you can send me a message on my contact page, christianbizownersonfire.com. I'd be happy to just say, I like to suggest use the phrase ready to thrive, just so I know you're wanting to set up a time to just have a conversation, kind of understand your situation and see if I might be a good resource for you. So, love to help you. There's no need to stay in the embarrassment phase. Anytime you're growing, you're going to have periods of times where you feel less confident or less stellar about where you're at. The key is just to keep moving forward and get the right support when you need it.